Jurassic World Evolution 3, or whatever it's going to be called, has been confirmed for release, most likely coming later this year when Rebirth releases in cinemas. Now it seems reasonable to expect that with the new entry in the JWE series, we'll be getting some new dinosaur species as well. So in today's video, I'm going to share the species that I most want to see in JWE3. So without further ado, let's get started. Now, one big thing I want to see in JWE3 is more species from the Triassic period, as it's currently severely underrepresented in the JWE series. Plateosaurus, I think, would be a perfect addition to the roster, as it gives us a large herbivore from the Triassic period, something we are sorely lacking. Most of the current Triassic species in the JWE roster are carnivores, like Coelophysis and Herrerasaurus. This dinosaur is one that's well known enough that I think there'd be plenty of dino fans happy with its inclusion. Also, as a fan of the Walking with Dinosaurs series, I remember this species quite fondly from their brief appearance in the first episode. Named after Godzilla, this creature is one of the largest theropods from the Triassic period, at around 5.5 to 6 meters long. Now, it is pretty similar to the slightly larger Herrerasaurus that is already in the game, but I think some variety with the Triassic carnivores would be good and would give Herrerasaurus a bit of a rival for the large Triassic carnivore spot. Still, one could definitely argue that this dinosaur's inclusion would be redundant since Herrerasaurus already fills the same niche, but I'd like to see this species or something similar regardless. These two Triassic era dinosaurs are pretty similar, as they're both thought to be omnivorous, and they're a similar size as well, with Eoraptor at around 1.3 meters long and Ulvacaria at around 1.5 meters long. Either of them would make a fine addition to the roster, serving as a small omnivore from the Triassic, although I wouldn't argue for both of them being included. Eoraptor has a cooler name, and we've had more fossil finds for it, so it would probably be the one I'd choose between the two. But Ulvacaria was found in India, so adding it would give some representation to other countries, which would be a good thing. I'd love to see one of these dinosaurs added to the game. This dinosaur is quite similar to Plateosaurus, except it's a lot smaller at around 2.5 meters long. Its addition would give us a smaller option for a Triassic herbivore, and for those players who like creating the illusion of having baby dinosaurs, it could potentially be used to represent a juvenile Plateosaurus. I think it would also just serve as a good prey dinosaur when creating Triassic-themed dinosaur habitats, specifically for Herrerasaurus and Gojirasaurus to hunt. Okay, so this one isn't technically a dinosaur, it's an archosaur, but JWE2 already has a few non-dinosaur creatures, and I could definitely see more of them being added to the roster in the third iteration. Postosuchus would make a unique Triassic carnivore, one that's a bit more crocodilian in appearance. It's also one I'm sure a lot of dinosaur fans know, as it was featured in Walking with Dinosaurs. But yeah, there's not much more to say on it. I'd love to see Postosuchus added to the roster, and that's going to conclude the Triassic era species I wanted to talk about in this video. So now let's move on to some more species that I'd like to see. Now, here's another case of there being two similar dinosaurs I'd like to see added. As with the Eoraptor and Ulvacaria, I think only one of these would really need to be added, as since they're so similar, adding both would be a bit redundant. Now, these dinosaurs are small herbivores that are both from Australia, and as an Australian, I would love to see some more Aussie dinosaurs, which is exactly why these two are on my list. I think they'd make a perfect addition to the roster of Aussie dinosaurs we already have, and would provide the Aussie carnivores already in the roster with a fitting prey animal. Leelinosaurus was another dinosaur from Walking with Dinosaurs and is slightly bigger than Quantosaurus, so I'd probably prefer it if I had to choose one. But Quantosaurus would certainly still be a good choice if they decided to add it. This Jurassic theropod, whose name means bird robber, is one that I really want to see added to the roster. I've been a big fan of this dinosaur since seeing it in the Walking with Dinosaurs documentary, partly because it has a really cool name. This species would be a good opportunity to add another feathered dinosaur as well, something I'd love to see more of in JWE3. It'd also give a good option for a Jurassic carnivore on the smaller side. This absolute behemoth of a dinosaur found in Argentina is one of the largest known land animals of all time, potentially even the largest of all time. Although there's a few contenders for that title, so it's not known for sure. I think this dinosaur would make a great addition to the roster, and would be my top pick for a new sauropod species to be added to the game. I think it's a pretty iconic dinosaur, and obviously its massive size, between 30 and 35 meters long, would make it a great addition to the roster. To compare that to the other sauropods in the game, Brachiosaurus is only about 18 to 22 meters long, whilst Dreadnoughtus is about 26 meters long. Argentinosaurus is way bigger, especially if you go for the higher end of its size estimate at 35 meters long. Honestly, I'd be surprised and disappointed if Argentinosaurus doesn't end up in JWE3 either at launch or in a DLC later down the track. This Jurassic era large carnivore is one that I really want to see added to the game. Now, to be fair, it is similar in size, time, and location to Ceratosaurus and Allosaurus, which are both already in the game. In fact, all three of these dinosaurs lived at the same time and in the same place, so they definitely interacted quite a lot. But I feel this addition would really round out the Jurassic roster quite nicely, and provide the Ceratosaurus and Allosaurus a good rival. If JWE3 sticks with Ceratosaurus and Allosaurus being best buddies like in JWE2, I'd especially like to see Torvosaurus be added, so that they can have a large carnivore to fight with that would have actually been around in the real life. I also just really like the name Torvosaurus, which I'm noticing now is a theme with a lot of the dinosaurs I've picked with this list. They just have cool names, okay? These two abeliosaurid theropods are both found in Africa, and both serve the role of a medium-sized carnivore. Cryptops is a bit bigger at around 6 to 7 meters long, compared to Rugops, which is around 5 meters in length. But either way, they'd serve as a carnivore that's smaller than the Carcharodontosaurus and Spinosaurus, which is exactly why I want one of these dinosaurs to be added, so they can serve as a lower rung on the food chain in this region and rough period of time. Personally, I'm more partial to Rugops, a name which means wrinkle face, but either of them would be great. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't know about this pterosaur before doing research for this video, and I only really picked it because I thought I ought to include at least one pterosaur on my list. Although, I didn't include a marine reptile, so maybe I didn't need to. But anyway, look at this massive head crest. What the heck? Just imagine having that flying around in your parks. Look, the head crest is the entire reason why I picked Nyctosaurus and not another pterosaur. Like, with how much I talked about Walking with Dinosaurs, one would be reasonable to assume I'd suggest Ornithocaris. But honestly, I just have barely used the pterosaurs in JWE2, so I don't feel much desire for brand new pterosaur species, since the ones already in the game are pretty new to me. But anyway, that's enough about pterosaurs. Back to dinosaurs. Honestly, I'm surprised that Protoceratops hasn't already been added to the roster, as it's a pretty well-known dinosaur. Mostly due to the Fighting Dinosaurs fossil, where it was found in the midst of a fight with a velociraptor, which is easily the coolest fossil ever found in the history of, ever. Protoceratops, though, would serve as a great addition to the roster, and I'd love to see some velociraptors hunt them, or maybe another dromaeosaur which is closer in size to the real velociraptors. I think it would also be cool as a small ceratopsian dinosaur, being even smaller than the Nasutoceratops. Plus, it's just an iconic dinosaur that deserves to be included. Come on, Frontier, give us Protoceratops already. Look, raptors are cool, and I'd love to see more of them in the game, especially if they're covered in feathers as they ought to be. Given that they gave Utahraptor feathers, I'm sure they'd do the same if they added Austroraptor. Now, I don't actually have a lot to say about the Austroraptor specifically. I mean, it's pretty big for a dromaeosaur, and it's actually the largest dromaeosaur found in the southern hemisphere. But really, the main reason I put it on the list is I just wanted to include a dromaeosaur of some description, and this was one I learnt about just before I started work on this video. So I guess recency bias is to blame? I don't know, I just think it's cool. This dinosaur is quite a unique one, as it's a four-winged dinosaur. Originally thought to be only able to use its wings to glide from treetops, it's now thought it was capable of powered flight. Given this, I think it would make the most sense to put this dinosaur in the aviaries. I think it'd be cool to have a flying dinosaur which could stand out a bit from the pterosaurs that currently dominate the aviaries. I also quite fondly remember the show Prehistoric Park, which featured Microraptor in one of its episodes. And it's how I learnt about them in the first place, so it'd be cool to have more of the species from that show as well. Now, at this point in the list, I wanted to suggest some dinosaurs to cover some of the specific groups of herbivores that we have in the game. First of all, we have the Ornithomimosaurids. And what better representative of this group than its namesake, Ornithomimus? A dinosaur I definitely didn't put on this list because it's also in Prehistoric Park. Wink wink. Okay, that was definitely the reason why I wanted to include this dinosaur specifically. But I also think it'd be nice to give us something new to use instead of Struthiomimus or Gallimimus, which get used a lot, at least in my experience. Okay, so I wanted to include an Ankylosaurid on this list, and I thought one of these two options would be good. Now, fun fact, Gastonia was the only dinosaur that, when doing research for this video, I had to add dinosaur to my Google search. Otherwise, it just showed me the city Gastonia in North Carolina. Given that, I assumed Gastonia would have been discovered somewhere in North Carolina near the city, but no, it was discovered in eastern Utah. Why didn't they just call it Salt Lake City then? Personally, I'm more partial to Antarctopelta. It's unique as it's the only known ankylosaur from Antarctica, so at least its name makes sense. It'd be cool to have another dinosaur from Antarctica as well, so I'd be happy to see it added to the game. Now, I already included a sauropod earlier on the list with Argentinosaurus, but I thought I'd suggest another one which would be cool. This sauropod, which also comes from Argentina funnily enough, had bony plates on its skin which acted as a sort of armour. I think it'd be cool to have armoured sauropods in our parks, and of course another Argentinian sauropod would make for a good addition to the roster as well. Now, whilst Protoceratops is a ceratopsian, I wanted to suggest another species to bolster the roster of ceratopsians, and I think either of those two would be a cool addition. Enosaurus I think would be quite cool as its front horn curves downwards, which is quite different from the other ceratopsians already in the roster. It's not overly large, it'd be about the same size as Nasutoceratops, but that's fine as there aren't that many of the smaller ones. Albertoceratops is a bit bigger and it looks pretty cool as it has two large horns above its eyes similar to Triceratops and Torosaurus, as well as two smaller curved horns atop its frill. Honestly, I'm not sure which of these species I'd rather see in the game. Either of them would be good additions. I honestly don't have a lot to say about these two. I wanted to suggest a Hadrosaur and these two seemed like good picks. Hadrosaurus would be good as it's the namesake of the hadrosaurs group, and it was also in the original Jurassic Park novel, so it'd be good to see it join the roster for that reason alone. Saurolophus has a small little crest that I thought looked quite cool, and that's honestly the extent of the reasoning for including that one. I think either of these options would be fine. Honestly, hadrosaurs just don't really interest me as much, so I don't really care too much if they add either of them, but I did want to suggest at least one hadrosaur, so yeah. Okay, so we've reached the end of my list with this stegosaur dinosaur. Decenturus would be a great addition to the roster as it's the largest stegosaur. It's estimated to be between 8 and 9 meters in length, which beats out the Stegosaurus, which is only about 7.5 meters. I think this would be a great new stegosaur to add, as for the most part the ones currently in the roster are on the smallest size, outside of Stegosaurus itself. So having another large option for one would be nice. So that's my list of 20 species I'd like to see added in JWE3. I don't expect all of them to be added, but if even one of these dinosaurs is added in the next installment of the series, I'd be pretty happy. I didn't strictly rank them in order of preference, although I will say the 5 or so at the bottom of the list I don't really care about as much as the others. And to be honest, I don't really mind what new Triassic species are added as long as they add new Triassic species that fill in a few of the different niches. But anyway, that's it for this video.
Subscribe for more dinosaurs.